So to start this, if you can just tell us what's your name and where are you currently, where are you now in this moment?
I'm Nick Graham Smith, and in this moment, I'm currently in my practice room, which is in the neighborhood of Villa Madalena in the city of São Paulo in Brazil,
Hmm.
South America.
I want to go to the next question, but I also want to just stay with the fact that you're in Brazil and just to say, how is that for you?
Well, it's how is that for me? It's a long relationship I've had with Brazil. Over 20 years. So it's a second home. I spend most of my time here now. Um, uh, it's a fascinating experience to, as you must have a similar experiences when we live in places that aren't, where we're born, or maybe the culture we grew up in, or our motherland. It's so I'm in a constant state, I think, of it's home, but it's also I'm not at home. So there's a kind of interesting um, split almost. That's the word that comes up for me for some reason. I feel a kind of yeah, there's a certain splitting, and even in my in language and dreams and thinking and expression and culture, there's a whole other side going on there. So if we were to do this interview, for example, in Portuguese, I think it would turn out completely differently.
Yeah, and I've
To
done that actually in these interviews. I've
yeah,
interviewed someone in English and in Serbian, and it's almost like another person comes up
yeah, yeah.
or a persona,
That's-
however.
yeah.
Yeah.
So and I really, and I started to realize after some time here that I really enjoy the this version of Nick that speaks Portuguese and that has integrated into Brazilian culture. He's
Mm.
a kind of
I,
different qualities.
I mean, as you're speaking about this, I can't feel like I'm constantly looking at the picture behind you, and I'm just thinking the split I'm seeing on the
Oh yeah,
image. And it's interesting that you've mentioned that as, as I'm currently kind of thinking, oh, will I speak in Serbian to people who I want to work with, or do I want to speak in English? And what happens? Who am I in those two languages? And it is a
mhm.
really interesting thing because it feels like I am the same. To me, it feels like I am the same person, but outside perception is completely different.
Yeah.
Um, and that's a very funny. What's your experience of that? Of that split of that.
Well, I feel like I'm aware of feeling quite different
Hmm.
and quite different aspects of me appear when I speak different language. So, and sometimes I sort of surprise myself in that context. So if I'm speaking English, for example, today I'm kind of noticing now I'm speaking English and I've just come from a place where I was speaking Portuguese, and it's also as a kind of context of the ground. It's carnival weekend here at the moment,
Oh
so
wow.
there's a lot of the streets are full of people covered in glitter and costumes and walking around, and there's a lot of and I feel it's kind of come into my room and logged on. I'm speaking English. I'm noticing, no, I'm kind of serious now. There's a seriousness and Englishness that has come up, which just
Hmm.
observing. Yeah.
That is, yeah. And I'm just, yeah, I'm noticing that kind of I don't know, the word is coming, polarity of uh how they kind of coexist in you and how do you need to carry them. Um it's
Mhm.
not an easy thing to make space within yourself for all these polarities, I guess.
Well, not easy. No, I think it becomes easier. I think one of the great gifts, I would say, of awareness is being able to notice what's happening, being, having curiosity and allowing yourself space for these things to happen.
Hmm.
Um, I think I can kind of remember a younger me, less aware, that would have been far more quick to suppress or quick to deflect or adapt even to what was expected, or an idea of what I felt was, I was trying to be in a certain situation. Whereas I think one of the, through Gestalt training and Gestalt therapy, that kind of expansion of selfing and selfness, and has brought up a lot of that kind of curiosity, and go, oh, what's happening here? And that's kind of maybe maybe I'll just let that stay for a while, and give it some more space to breathe and speak and act. So
Mm. Well,
yeah.
what you're just saying reminds me of I just was reading a Gestalt book which is called Risking Being Alive, and he was talking about how often we don't stay in conflict for too long. We kind of go
Mhm.
away before it can actually give us nurturance or understanding, or and what you've just said just really feels like you are kind of having building capacity to stay in that tension.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of truth in that really, there's that kind of paradoxical um urge to get away from conflict, urge to run away from anything that feels unusual or straight, with that's that constant and perfectly understandable searching for feeling peace, feeling ease, but the paradox being, yeah, but what happens if you do build up some tolerance and you do allow yourself to be kind of embrace that part, or that polarity, and see what's happening there, and um
Hmm.
yeah, kind of building that tolerance is definitely an art form, I guess, in some way, because it doesn't it you know it's very hard to explain. Why would that be a good thing? Why would that be useful?
Yeah. Do you have even anything close to an explanation for that?
Well, now I feel like now I'm aware of getting going to a kind of intellectual headspacey kind of, and I'm resisting that. I think I'm feeling, oh, I don't want to go
Uh-huh.
there.
Uh-huh. Then thank
Kind
you
of
for
like
that.
far too much responsibility to try and,
Yeah.
um, but I think, yeah, I think what's coming up for me, it would simply be, to sit with the experience of what, we'd need to go to a kind of an actual, we need to live through that and experience that to get to a place, I think, where I could make some sense of that. I think making sense of rather than making meaning, that I would definitely go put myself on the making sense side of things, as in, a sensed experience of what that means to meet a conflict, to work with, to stay with a conflict, to engage and potentially learn something or grow, but potentially not, who knows, rather than, rather than I'm going to extract some meaning out of this.
Mm. It's really, I
But,
haven't, before you've just said this, I haven't really distinguished the two words, but making sense really is new for me. As in like not new, but I see it in a new way as you've just used it right now, which means
mhm.
engaging with that through senses rather than through meaning.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm really sold on that. That for me makes a lot of sense. It makes sense in that sense that it feels like an integration of, it is, we are using cognitive capacity, there are thoughts, there are, intellect explanations involved, but unless it's integrated kind of in our experience and we really feel it and emotionally and we kind of embody it, we can understand something when not feel it. And this is something I hear all the time. Clients say so often, they go, I know that this is not true, but I feel it is,
Mm,
but I really feel, I know this thing I believe about myself is, learned, or it's just not, intellectual. I get that, but I live my life feeling as though this thing is true.
mhm.
And working with that is I think, really where, well, that's where, I think Gestalt therapy then is ready. It's kind of goes, yes. Doesn't go, wow, whoa, what's happening? That's difficult.
Yeah.
That's strange. It goes, yeah, of course. That's what we do. That's what we want to be curious about.
Hmm. Hmm. And I mean, coming back, I diverged, but I was just curious. But coming back to you, who are you as a person? What are your passions, qualities, interests?
Wow, that's a
Yeah, yeah.
divergent. I, as a person, I am, my passions. So I've come to working as a therapist quite, I would say, relatively late in life. It's a sort of, later midlife kind of career change. So I had a lot of art and music in my life previously, which I still do. So I have passions for creativity, passions for expression in art forms. In my background and my previous work and training. Um, and I have a passion for nature, I would say. Increasingly, um, I find myself more and more at home in, I mean, we use the phrase like the natural environments, although it's so hard to tell. Even, how natural is this environment? What do we really mean by that? And um, and that's a paradox for me, living in a city of 20 million people, an incredibly urban environment, but with easy access to incredible nature. So there's some quite extraordinary polarities there living here.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, I don't know. How is that? And do you want to know more? How do you feel? Does
I
that set?
actually, I think for me, this is my curiosity rather than I think that the question you can feel it in the way you want, but I guess
Hmm.
I want to know because I don't think we ever discussed this. Is what was your first impetus for art and how was that nurturing for you?
I I grew up in a family surrounded by creativity. Um, so there was my grandfather was a filmmaker, my grandmother was a costume designer and a painter. My father was a designer, um, and I can't ever remember a time when it just didn't feel it was never a thing, it was never, be creative or it's now time, I'm just very, very, how I feel, very fortunate that it felt as it was just a completely natural thing
Mm.
in my world. It's just what happened. It's what what people did around me.
Mm.
Um, yeah, it makes me sad when I hear people say, when I hear phrases like, "Oh, I'm not creative," or "I
Yes.
can't draw," or "I can't paint," or "I can't," "Oh, I could never do that." I feel a real, oh,
Mm.
how that gets me. Just saying it right now, I feel that because, I think, gosh, to have had that experience where you've interjected this message about yourself,
Yeah.
it's been very sad. I mean, and frustrated as well that because I just think that creativity, I see it as innate,
Yeah.
like so many things I think are innately human, but our access to them, that's where the that's where the problems arise. That's where the questions
Mm.
arise in modern society.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I like now as you're speaking, I'm like having this like need to check because I recently saw an amazing graffiti in London, but I can't now say what was written on it, but it was something around um uh if you like put a dot, you're an artist or something around. It's as simple as that. I mean I'm probably
Mhm.
just butchering this thing because I don't remember, but there's something in this um that it's almost like um it creativity belongs to someone, whereas like you can be creative in so many different ways through so many different means. It's just
Mhm.
that like language creates this duality
Yeah,
um that we then get stuck in.
yeah, completely. I mean, I think I remember somewhere in our training at some point, I remember coming across this really simple idea that just living is a creative act, just the actual, you know, actually being a part of all of this is involves creativity. And, just and that when I remember that kind of landing with me and going, wow, how true is that? So yeah, a dot can just a simple dot can be a work of art or makes you an artist or whatever it said. It's empowering people, I guess. It's the empowerment or to connect with your innate creativity and just be
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, it does, yeah, to kind of soften those blockages, I guess.
Mm. Mm. And what are some values or like core or central values, and how do you hold those in your life that you live by?
Well, that's easy now for me to answer. It's something I guess I've thought about a lot, but at the moment, certainly, um, I'm I'm just doing so much work around compassion, and I would just come straight to the word compassion as a core value to guide, to give orientation, um, in life, in a world where I think it's just more important than ever. Um, so, so those, I think, if yeah, integrating compassion to one's life is just such a central idea for me. Being sensitive to, and all the qualities and values that then come with that. So, being sensitive to another's suffering, being non-judgmental, um, wanting to do something to help, and the way compassion can be for others, can be for oneself, and also the ability to receive compassion, to be
Mm.
able to. So it really, in a relational sense, it just sits at the center, I think, of when we consider values. Um,
Mm. Mm. That's yeah.
yeah, that's what that feels like. That has given me a real clarity about, particularly in the middle of a world that just seems so chaotic at times and so lacking in values and lacking in direction. Um,
Mm.
it feel and I think compassion has this extraordinary capacity, in a sense, to hold anything and everything. There's nothing that can, if you can access compassion, there's nothing that you can't sit with and be able to, at least on some level, go, okay, right. This is a way I can handle even something that seems completely unforgivable, for example. I think
Mm.
it's a place to sit in.
Mm. And what event or set of circumstances have shaped or impacted who you are and how? And
Hmm.
it's a hard question because it's never an
That's
event,
a
but
very hard question because,
yeah.
I mean, I go straight away to events that I feel I can't, or I feel wouldn't be appropriate to talk about
Mhm.
here in this format. So, not that I don't want to talk about them
Yeah.
or don't, but just it's of a nature. So there's so that now I'm aware that I'm kind of, all right, now I'm censoring and I'm organizing my
Mm.
narrative and what I mean, I think to that maybe what I can say is that is just perhaps that just really brings up and highlights how we are shaped by our experiences and how, particularly. So what I'll do, I'll censor the difficult ones.
Yeah.
So I don't go into that, but I'll just name that there are, I've had difficult experiences in my life that have shaped me, have had an enormous impact on who I am. Um, and I don't think, and I wouldn't say that the difficult, the challenging, the traumatic experiences have had a negative impact on me. I think with work and with understanding and making sense of, coming back to that, they are experiences that could have, I'm even able to see how they shape me for the better. They've maybe opened me up to all kinds of things. So there's hope in that. I'm not, I think there's a lot of hope in that, in the way we can grow from these experiences. And then I think good experiences as well shape us and give us. Um, so
And can I just ask, in without naming them, the how part, meaning, uh, you know, how after the difficult experience, how did you keep the hope, and how did you work through them, um, so that they become almost like a portal to self-knowledge rather than bring you into cynicism or close you to life?
mm, good question. Great question. I So my sincere answer there is like I wish I'd done it differently in a sense. I wish in certain cases I wish I had gone to therapy. I wish I had seen a therapist. I wish there'd been someone there for me to kind of guide me in that direction, or to, with a lot of these experiences, they remained open for a long, long time, actually. Some without me even knowing it, some without me even realizing it, until I went to therapy. So
Mm.
the simple answer is therapy, is how.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I think that's such an important thing. I mean, as you were speaking to this, I always had that image of like, I have an image of just like a broken bone, which is just left to hang thinking that it will heal by itself without any support from the outside. And then it heals, but it just affects the whole system to organize around it so that it doesn't hurt. And I think I have a hope that more and more people will recognize the broken spiritual bones.
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
and
that's a great image actually, and that really speaks to me because I did break my leg. That is one of my physical traumatic incidents was breaking my leg, and
Okay.
it was a slow process. It was exactly that support that it healed by itself with time. Well, not by
Mm.
itself, with support. But it's the thing that fascinates me about it now is like and this was over 20 years ago, but I can you can feel where it broke, the callus around, and it kind of
Mm.
heals in a way where it's stronger than it was before because it's kind of got this extra layer of calcium that's formed into this extra strong. So that kind of weak point becomes this kind of source of strength.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That does feel hopeful. And who had the most impact on who you are as a human? If you can name, I mean, as in like, if there are like um unique individuals or groups of people or institutions or whatever comes to you.
So, well, it's interesting. Can can you just repeat the question?
So, who has had an impact on who you are today and how?
So the reason I asked you to repeat the question, I think I was just sitting with there are kind of two parts to this. So the one part is who, and then the other part is me, is like on you.
Yeah.
So I kind of rush to, I can feel my mind going, okay, there's a question coming in. I've got to like scan my brain for who is this? Who am I going to say, or who comes to mind, or what's happening, what's coming up for me? But then it's the other, but then I'm really noticing, but hang on, it's just like me as a person today part that's really, I think I'm checking in with that first of all, going, well, okay, so before I get to the who, I need to kind of make sense a little bit of the me here. Um and so I think, me as a person today in this moment, what the people that are having an important impact on me are, I'm going to say Paul Gilbert for who created compassion focused therapy. He's someone I've been very interested in his work lately. Um, and that's definitely landing with me with a big impact. Um, I could kind of name other people, I guess, around that, but I'm just going to say that name right now. That's like a person, and I feel that's true to my experience of me at this moment. Is like because I'm constantly, there's someone will come across my path, and I'll start reading lots of, it's the same with music. It's musicians or
Mm.
so
And
like.
who are some artists that spoke to you, as in like that you've seen their work and they've shifted something in your soul?
So again, at different moments in my life, different different people, different places. The most recent I'm just thinking of like the most recent exhibition I went to in a museum that really spoke to me and really shifted me was actually um, it was a group show and it wasn't and this is kind of interesting. It didn't have named artists. So it was a show of African textiles. Um, So it was and it was all about patterns and forms and interconnections, geometry and colors and materials. And there was so much rhythm and energy. And I came out of that exhibition feeling completely energized and yeah, alive. Felt
Hmm.
like dancing after that exhibition.
Hmm. Oh, that it feels just good to listening to you and in how embodied the response to that work was. Yeah, it's
Yeah, and I'm glad I was so happy to have that experience as well because in parallel, there was a kind of contemporary group show, contemporary artists, um, and I felt very cold in that space. I didn't feel moved. I didn't feel touched. I felt quite quite cold, really. Yeah.
um, and that's actually quite um something about allowing art to be what it is for us and noticing how it moves us and just I often when someone sees either the painting I'm doing or something I normally hear, oh, like I'm not an like a good judge, but this is what I see. And
Mm,
I kind of I find it really nice um to give what you've just described feels like giving permission to see whatever your body is seeing almost.
completely. And maybe there was something about that was easier as we were talking about it. And I'm coming back to your question. So it's like the who and the me kind of and like so perhaps it was kind of going to an exhibition where there was no kind of name or it wasn't about this what this kind of name represents and that's kind of can be quite intimidating and we have so much of that um culture where we celebrate these kind of big names but to be in a nameless environment then you can really connect with yourself and what it's how it speaks to you and what that's about um, so accessing that, yeah, I think there's something important there.
And that's as you've just said that, I think that's another thing in the individualist societies where we think that the person is absolutely separable from their environment, and
Mhm.
therefore they've created it, completely canceling the fact that they are a product, a being of the environment, being of
Right.
the field.
Yeah, this kind of illusion of specialness and separateness that
Yeah.
somehow they exist outside of it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, then as saying that, I think it is important for someone to also step outside of of the collective unconscious and maybe bring something new. It's almost like I don't know, there's this Instagram meme which is to like you congratulating you for the bravery to leave your village and bring back the medicine. It's sometimes it's important, I think, to break out from that. Um,
Yeah.
but I think it's even that I think is also kind of off the field, that the field needs to create a person who will bring back the medicine.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love this. Yeah, exactly. I love this phrase of the field. And um, that's touching something on me, which is it's kind of to do with underdogs. I think, this cult of the individual, we celebrate success obsessively. We idolize, we put these artists and these people on the screen, and we hold them up in this way that I think the negative impact of that is then we create a society of I'm not good enough, I'm inadequate, I'll never be anything, I'm not special, and 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 it's almost denying people the right to be a part of the field, to recognize their of the fieldness. So that's a lovely phrase, and that touches again on something I see so much. I feel I'm in contact with so much. This, but what this ordinariness. So I'm a big champion of of simplicity and contentment. Lately I've been thinking how much I turn to this word contentment, just the idea of being content rather than happiness or this kind of constant pursuit of joy or happiness, but just being kind of okayness, contentment.
Mm.
Yeah,
As you're speaking to that, I'm also kind of in a process of trying to see what do I really need, separate from what I think and what I'm told I need. And like of my one of my I call her my spirit grandmother, she speaks of chop wood, carry water activities and how
Mhm.
nourishing they can be,
Yeah,
and how much we just turn to more and bigger and higher, and but at the end of the day, how much fulfillment there is in that somehow.
absolutely. No, without a doubt. And I won't remember the like reference here, but there's research has been done onto this. There's a name for it, which I'm kind of trying to think about now, but it's a kind of like, we have if you can measure it, your contentment or your happiness, it has a kind of level. It doesn't matter how wealthy you become or how you can have peaks and troughs around this, but ultimately there is just this kind of level that has a kind of simplicity around it. So yeah, these chop wood activities, chop
Mm.
wood, gather water. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And the next question is, how do you live and experience your gender?
How do I live and experience my gender? Well, what comes to mind, what I'm just sitting with that question and letting it sort of pass through me. And yeah, I think, and this, as it passes through me, I, it brings up for me really the idea of masculine, feminine energy. Um, and so I experience gender, I think, in terms of it. I'm connected to it in terms of energy, I would say. I understand and I feel comfortable in that space of balancing these forces that we've named masculine, feminine, and and I'm curious about that. And I can really, so it comes back to a question of integration of polarities of that I think are innate, I would say, in all of us. I think as soon as we start then getting caught up in stereotypes, stereotypical kind of associations and locking things down, that's when we start finding ourselves things getting complicated. So one way of illustrating this, I guess, is there's I was talking about this recently about the kind of difference between this idea of the hero's journey and the heroine's journey, um, and the masculine or the toxic masculinity narrative versus this kind of very hidden female narrative or feminine narrative about what we can and what we're accessing. So I don't know. I feel like I'm being a bit waffly now. I'm not really, and I'm not being very physical either. Uh, but I mean, the simple answer, I guess, also, well, there's a truth in that, as a white male, I experience the ease of that in the world that I live in.
Mm.
So I experience that privilege. Um,
And that's actually, I mean, you may have not explored this. So if you don't have the answer to the question, just feel free to say that. But I just had I just had a discussion with my supervisor recently, and we were speaking of this uh, of not needing to question what this means for you being a man, but
mm,
in a way also, as much as it looks like a privilege, from where I stand, it feels very damaging because it maybe you can't see it, but it does stop you from forming genuine relationships because people will interact with you from their persona if you are not aware of what does it mean to be um, a white male.
yeah. So I think I understand what you're saying, which is
Yeah,
around, yeah, how do I experience, have I ever experienced uh, discrimination against a sense of being kind of judged or for being a white male and having projections put on top of me around that. So assumptions made and
that
making that
and
harder for me to.
exactly that, and also exactly the projections of that people relate to you based on the projections, but also that how much were you able to look at your own pain given this the narrative that a man is getting growing up, which might have been different to you, for you.
Hmm.
But I feel like what happens is that um, it looks like a privilege that you don't look at your own pain, and then someone else is kind of trying to support you to make be aware of it and be like, yeah, look at this, please. But then also, it's not an authentic life. I don't know if I'm making sense, but it's almost like um, the connections you have with the person who might still be projecting stuff are still not genuine, authentic connections. So even though it looks like a privilege, if what you are is about connection, you're not going to get it until you look at how you are formed, what are your biases, what is it that hurts you? Because I
Hmm.
believe that this cannot not hurt you. I mean, and this is very a personal belief, but I don't know. I want to maybe hear whether you felt that it has hurt you being a white man.
Well, I mean, there's, I feel like there's so much more, there are more layers to this than being a white man. I think because I'm also an English white man,
Mm.
or rather a British white man. And that that's a whole, that's very different to being for example, a Brazilian white man. So if you're a Brazilian and you're born of European descent versus, your experience is going to be completely different, I think. So it's a tricky one. I guess I feel sort of like we get stuck because it's just too vast. I think it just makes me want to talk about this on an individual level. I think it's it's also like I mean, on a fundamental level, we're talking about experience. I only know what it's like to experience being
Mm-hmm.
alive from this body. I can do my very best to meet you and hear you in what your experience is. And I'm fascinated by that and I want to know that, but I can't not be this. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really, yeah, it's kind
But I
of,
guess
it's
my question is whether the stereotypization of um of what a man should be has affected you to live differently in your body and less fluidly. And have you encountered that?
so I kind of feel like not, I would sort of be more inclined to say, I think I just grew up in, I mean, so I grew up in now I'm thinking about my education, right? So I grew up in a really, and I had the experience of, almost of a single sex school
Mm-hmm.
in England, playing rugby, having to wear shorts even in the coldest winter days to toughen you up. All that, I grew up surrounded by that in my education system. But I think I always just innately thought it was absolutely ridiculous and just never, I think I rebelled against it from a very young age. I never bought into it ever. I
Mm.
think there's a part of me that I get that stereotype. I see it and I see how harmful it is and how damaging it is. But I've never identified with it, and I never
Yeah.
felt it was. I've always felt free enough to not, not have that, but not, I don't need to act in a particular way or
Yeah.
be a particular way. Um, but again, that freedom is like, but that's my privilege, isn't it? It's so easy it's not that hard or challenging to be, a slightly to not fall in line in that sense. I mean, I suppose so, but I was,
Yeah.
you could kind of say it was,
But as I'm
yeah,
sitting here, I kind of feel like maybe you're not this particular issue. Maybe you're not giving yourself enough credit for the bravery of embodying your authenticity. I mean, I don't know if that was ever challenged, but I believe it might have been in different stages of your life.
yeah. I mean, I was challenged. I experienced that challenge of being, of having a kind of body type, of being a skinny kid, of being, I experienced that kind of teasing or, on a very mild level. I guess I'm just so deeply aware of how how experiencing your body, experiencing your gender, how complex a life issue that is for so many people. I feel there is a part, there's that part of me that's just feels, gosh, I don't want to take up space about this here. That's for me. And that isn't as I'm not trying to be self-deprecating or deny my bravery, and I appreciate you saying that. And I think you're, and I really appreciate what was it. It is, you know, you make a hugely valid point to, and maybe it is like it's a delicate subject to take away enough to allow to give a white man space to speak about that. I think that is important, and you can, and then maybe my response is illustrating that as well. How there's a sort of who me? I get to talk. You wanted me to talk about this, really? Um, yeah,
And
there's
I
something about
think that's
them.
I think you're naming something that, and this is very personal. I feel like I think you're naming something that I find very important, which is I think experiences need to have space to be told as they are idiosyncratically. Of course, with awareness that there is um, maybe harder, maybe less hard experiences, but if we don't allow ourselves fully and truly our pain, we will continue to propagate it in
Hmm.
unconscious ways. And
Yeah.
I feel like that now I'm going to broadly generalize, but I feel like that's what I feel a lot of compassion for men who I feel kind of deny their own pain often and then continue to propagate it because of this structure that is constantly being told, like, yeah, you have no right to complain, like you have all these
Hmm.
privileges. um
Yeah.
and um and obviously, like, there is some merit to that, but I think that also then leads to extremization that we wanted to avoid in the first place. And I don't know if I'm clear enough in this, but is as clear as I can get with words, I guess.
Mm. No, I hear what you're saying. I think it's wonderful what you're saying, um, and it's touching to receive that compassion as well. And I think you're and the repetition of the potential for repetitive yeah, repeating of not breaking this transgenerational traumas and patterns of behavior. Um, for that to happen, it's essential that we create a space for some of the most toxic behaviors that exist to be examined, to be brought into
Exactly.
this space where they can be named and they can be explored. And yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. And we were speaking about this, but maybe if you want to make it clarified, because we touched already, but like, how do you experience privilege and power in your life? How did they kind of, how aware of you are, of them? What is privilege and power for you?
Well, I experience it as ease. I come back to that word easiness. It's just,
Mm,
I don't have, I live in a world that is as though a lot of my experience of the world is as though it was designed to make my life as easy as possible. Um,
mm,
so things just, that I mean, that's the kind of, I mean, my mind now, I'm with the kind of ridiculousness of, you know, when I see people getting distressed because they're being held up by a queue or a delay or something, in an airport. It's really just having a British passport, for example, just being able to walk through pretty much any customs in the world, and this kind of, this facilities of movement, this ease of um, so I don't come up against obstacles in that sense.
Well, you've seen you witnessed that, and I'm just wondering, when was the first time where that became kind of brutally obvious, and what do you do with that from that place?
Um, as on a personal level, it became clear to me when I was with my partner, who's Brazilian, and the difficulties of migration and what is involved in the UK, for example, in applying for a visa. And as soon as you enter into the space of migration, and I think you start to that can be a wake up call for a lot of people
Mm,
to things are our things aren't as easy as I thought they always will be,
mm,
or I've experienced them as being previously, and you suddenly realize, whoa, there are all these rules and conditions, and for you there's one set of rules, and for this person there's a different set of rules, and for you things work like this, and for this person that works differently. And so, I mean, and that's just one ongoing experience of that I've been that has touched my life. But I think what can you do about it is awareness, is educate yourself, um, be aware, and also I would say, and this is hugely challenging at times, but don't be, call it out when you see it happening. Don't be silent. So, and that's very hard, and that can cause real issues in, again, coming back to personal examples, but I'm thinking like in family situations or extended family situations or friends, you know, if you experience somebody unknowingly taking their own privilege for granted, and it comes up in very subtle ways, I think then you have to just name it. You have to call it out and have that hard conversation. And even if even if it turns into an argument, it's worth having. And I've had loads of those to say.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah. And um, what's your experience of your age?
My age.
Mm-hmm.
What's my experience of my age? It's funny. I think you just reminded me. I think I had a dream about my age last night. I think
Okay.
this might have been the first time I've ever dreamt. So I'm in my 50s, and it was a dream about being in my 50s. And I think there was a little bit of kind of like, oh, you're in your 50s now, and that what does that mean? And there's stuff about kind of preparing, I think, for what's ahead. I've got age, I've got old folks in their 80s, my father and my stepmother. And so you live, yeah, you live closely to the aging process. And I guess you kind of connect yourself to that. But I'm a huge fan of I love the We Are All of Our Ages.
Yeah.
Um,
That was actually
well,
my answer to the same question.
yeah, I come
In
back to that always. So I'm so aware of yeah. So again, like the other day, I was on my bike, it's just cycling, and I was so aware of that the child in me that would go cycling in the woods close to our house, and just those kind of I love catching those moments, those memories that are really alive and you carry with you. So
I mean, I find it really interesting as you're now speaking, kind of n not experiencing US 50, whatever that means. I don't know what that means. I don't know. I definitely
yeah,
experience you as someone younger. But what does that mean? In which way? I cannot say, but th there is something that's going on for me as you said, oh, I'm around 50. I was like, Nick, you? Yeah.
yeah. So I try to. Oh, and I've got like, godchildren who will be like, you're just you're like a big kid, aren't you? Or and that playfulness, I think is so important.
Yeah.
Uh, I value that. Coming back to values, I would say, I mentioned compassion, and that was all, very important. But for me right now, but now we're talking of like and playfulness, I would say that's an important
Hmm.
quality to have in life.
Yeah. And just this next part is a little bit about Gestalt and your relationship to Gestalt.
Hmm.
And how did you got connected um to Gestalt, or what brought you?
Well, it's quite accidental, quite random, as a lot of things tend to be, in my experience. One thing connecting with another. And, it was just at a point, it was at a point where I was considering changing career, and I was getting interested in psychology as an option. And I was just investigating kind of, okay, you start with this idea of psychology. And then it opened up, and then I kind of discovered, oh, hang on, there's a lot going on here. There's humanistic, and then there's kind of psychoanalysis, and then there's social psychology, and then there's person-centered and transactional analysis, and it's like enormous. So it was really just doing the when I did a kind of, can't remember what it's called. It's kind of foundation course at Metanoia, and where we just went through kind of, you had like a little taster of all the different modalities, and when yeah, and Gestalt really jumped out at me, I guess, for its creativity, for its fluidity, its kind of presence, its compassion, and just on so many levels, it felt like, that's the one. Yeah,
Hmm.
got to choose one, so I'm going to go with that.
Sounds like it was a sensory experience.
Oh yeah. I felt, yeah, just got a feeling, gut feeling.
Yeah. And what, I mean, you kind of answered this, but is there anything that you want to maybe highlight more that attracts you to Gestalt? The theory, the practice, the way of doing it, the
Well, I mean that sort of stumps me in a way, because I feel Gestalt. It's so many different things to different people, and I know you're going to hear that all the time when you talk to Gestalt people, and everybody's going to have something different to say, which is so it's probably that's one of the things that I'm really draws me to it, that I really like, um, is its generosity in allowing whoever practices and is a part of it to really make it their own and have their own experience within it. And I think it's, my experience of having a bit of like UK based training and then Brazil training, so different. So I got to kind of see different aspects of it. And you can really see different schools, I think, place a different emphasis on different areas of it.
Do
For
you want to,
me,
sorry, maybe after you finish that thought, do you also want to speak to those differences experiencing the UK and the Brazilian way of being?
sure. So I guess I'll start with that because that will kind of lead me then into where I'm at kind of currently. I suppose that the UK experience was more academic, I would say, and understandably so because it's part of an academic institution, so has to kind of conform or meet the regulations and requirements of the institution. And so, there's a lot of um, what would you call it? There's a lot of structure and a lot of kind of things that have to be done to meet academic rigor, which is what makes academia so sort of robust, particularly in the UK. So that's great, but kind of a contradiction in terms with Gestalt therapy, which is, you know, all about kind of exploring where, creativity and a kind of looseness. So I think there's a bit of a tension there. I think it's really, but it was my UK experience was a really thorough, really solid, really good grounding, really got that kind of academic side to it with the practice, but then the practice side, the experiential part of it, that's what really I felt was really flourished in the Brazilian system or approach. So huge focus on the experiential part, so not very little theory. Kind of polar opposites in a way. I mean, I think the UK was like, we cover the theory and then we're going to really kind of put that into practice. So you get all that theory and then you apply it and we learn it and we really refine that. So that was that approach. I think in Brazil, the experience was we don't do the theory, we just do the experience and we live it, and then we arrive at the theory at the end. So it'll kind of come out of what you've been through.
Mm.
Now, I don't know if I'm not saying one is better than the other. They're just incredibly different. Um, and but but it's very cultural as well. So I think in Brazil, the culture is already predisposed to be more expressive and more physical and more embodied. There's more music, there's more dancing, there's more action. It's way more. There's more sweat. There's more, like an end of a weekend of training. Here, your clothes are dirty, you're sweaty, you're grimy, you're like you've really been through something. Um, so it's really, I found that very challenging as well, being a white male Englishman in this context. It really challenged me to kind of, yeah, explore some boundaries there, some resistances.
Mm.
Uh, but I think it's a really it challenged me just to really learn a lot about myself in the process, I would say. That has helped me enormously now.
Mm. Mm. And I guess what I always struggle when the differences are so stark, um, is to not judge one or the other as the right one. Um,
Yeah,
And I imagine that, I don't know how that was for you, but I guess for me, there is, I wish I could just see that process as like, oh, how interesting. Like, um, how interesting that this can be done in such a completely different way. Because
Mhm.
my embodied experience coming from a culture that was very, um, what's the word? Trying to equalize everything. Um,
Mhm.
my experience is that everything that kind of jumps out from that whatever equal standard that's being set, it feels like wrong rather than, oh, how curiously different. So I'm just wondering, how was that for you?
I think what was helpful was I realized quite early on that the UK training I felt much more comfortable in. I would have preferred, I kind of preferred it. The Brazilian training, I felt completely like a fish out of water, and I found it much harder to be a part of. And it was in that polarity between my comfort zone and my challenge zone that I realized where I was, where my growth was going to happen, and that there was a lot going on there. So, and I think that also brings me then to what do we do with all of this, which is ultimately when we're sitting with a client and we're working with this, like there's this way, there's that way, there's not one way, is is invaluable because we realize like it's not about there's a way to do this and I'm going to fit this client into this way. No, it's about meeting this client in their world and their space and whatever's happening there and kind of discovering where are we going to go, on this journey together, what's going to happen here. And it does come back to this kind of like, on one level, this comfort zone and this challenging zone. On one level, we are where does my client need support and where do they need a little bit of pressure? And where do we, how do we challenge and how do we support and how do we work with this experience? So, I just don't think there's a right or wrong way of doing any of this. Um,
Mm.
so I feel perhaps this experience I've had really helped me see that, having gone
Mm.
through like different, just being, oh wow, they do it like that over there, they do it like this over here, and I'm sure over there it's completely different again. That makes you really open, I think,
Mm.
to how you approach working with the client.
And I guess for me, what I feel is very enriching to have that. It feels, once you're able to um sit with the differences and reconcile them within yourself and give them proper space, it just feels like you're richer for the two experiences. And then therefore you can offer more to the person you're working with exactly because of that.
Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
And how has Gestalt therapy affected you as a person?
I'm going to come back to awareness. Uh, I can say awareness, compassion, and authenticity. Those are the three words that kind of pop up. I think, in that sense, it's helped me. This expansion of awareness is a gift. Is amazingly transformative. Um, the compassion part, I'd say, is to do with relational quality. So
Mm.
my experience of relationships and not only to other people but to the world and just to life to existence. There's a this relational aspect and an appreciation for it has expanded as well
Mm.
enormously. So expansion again
Mm.
and authenticity, I think, is this kind of more body felt
Yeah.
ability to enjoy, enjoy being is to not confuse things that I think I used to get really confused with like excitement and fear, for example. So I think I used to be a very anxious person, way less anxious than I used to be. And anxiety used to be something that would probably get in the way of me doing stuff that I actually wanted to do. So I'd kind of be afraid of it, or I'd talk myself out of it, or stuff
Mm,
like that. Um, and that kind of body felt like being able to go, wow, yeah, that those, butterflies are kind of learning to enjoy the feeling of butterflies and be okay with that and go,
mm,
that's because you want to do it. It's because you like it.
yeah.
What's the worst that can happen? Have some fun. So it's made me lighter, I think, as well, in that sense.
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, for me, as you're speaking to that, it actually helped me to separate the fear from excitement because often they were way too close together and they're not the same thing.
Yeah, no, they feel identical
Yeah.
at times, but they're not the same thing at all. So
Mm,
that's been a really, I think, yeah, it's kind of separating, giving clarity around these things.
yeah. And do you feel that you are part of a Gestalt community? And what have been some challenging moments related to therapy and to Gestalt?
I do, well, yeah, I do feel like I'm a part of a community here. There is a strong sense of community around the institute here. Lots of so there's kind of core training, and then there's lots of workshops and retreats and all kinds of other activities that happen, and a lot of group work. So so that's strong, but I'm also sort of a bit of an outsider in that sense. I think I felt that's a place that I also kind of feel comfortable. I always have done, I think, kind of a bit distant and observing. And I think it's also when you talk to challenges, I think any group, any community, any, will inevitably start to have its sort of, in-group, out-group dynamics, like what is expected and what is a part of that,
Mm.
culture. Um, So naturally I'm like a one foot in and a 1 foot out kind of person when it comes to these kind of communities, I think.
Mm.
And I'm also, so I think we were talking earlier, I'm kind of entering this CPD phase. So I'm dipping my toe into other groups and other forms of training and other areas of interest. So like for example, I'm really interested in the Enneagram as well, and that's something that came out of the Claudio Noronha Gestalt here in Brazil because he was really important in the Enneagram world, and so that's a community as well, and you can really dive into that. But at the same time, I'm in. I feel a part of that, but I also feel, and maybe it's just the moment I'm in, I'm really sort of mapping out a lot of different, experimenting with lots of different groups and different communities.
Mm. And what are some great memories from Gestalt that Gestalt has kind of facilitated?
Great memories. Wow, so many. I'm just letting kind of images come to me, memories. A really good memory that I'm having now is it's to do it's a little bit vague. There's a but it's something to do with it's more of a sensed experience of I'm in the group. So there's a big, there's like 30 people, 25, 30 people in this room, in this large group. And I'm taking part in some activity and I'm going to go and be in the middle of this group and do whatever it is I'm going to do. And there's a kind of moment of clarity, whereas I'm no longer feeling like, what am I going to do? Am I going to get this right? Am I going to, is this going to be liked? Is this going, I really hope I don't make a complete mess of it, that's just simply not present. What is present is this sensation of I'm going to go and I'm going to be me and and I just trust in being myself and engaging, doing whatever it is we're going to do. And whatever happens will happen.
Mm.
And I'm fully present for this moment. Kind of like, okay, let's do it.
Mm-hmm. And I can see it, like, I don't know, your embodiment really tells me.
Yeah,
Um,
I've got like
yeah,
goosebumps thinking of
yeah.
this kind of, yeah, this emotion has come up for me as I just feel, gosh, wow, that's just amazing to be able to,
Oh, free. It feels free.
yeah, to have let all
Yeah.
those things, those barriers, those blocks, those things just go away and just go,
Mm.
this is it's
Yeah.
just showing up. Yeah, I'm gonna just show up for this.
Mm. And just to wrap up, also being conscious of time, what is it that's next that you think is next for Gestalt, and what do you think is next for you?
So next for Gestalt, my personal kind of theory on all of this is that Gestalt is, um, by its very nature, integrative. I think it's born with an integrative spirit. Um, so I kind of see perhaps a modern or a contemporary or a future Gestalt evolving with whether training or schools might evolve in this sense with an integrative way, because I think it set the stage as well. I think Gestalt set the stage for so many things to happen that have happened since, that I'm kind of curious about it kind of integrating itself into what it already instigated, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel, you studied, there's so many different modalities and things nowadays which will reference Gestalt. There's something called Gestalt therapy where they do this thing with chairs. Or there's something, that kind of comes up. But so on the other hand, I think, or the future of Gestalt is it's going to kind of become this kind of be like vinyl or something, it'll be this like kind of analog thing that we just is like from the 19th, stays in this kind of 70s thing, and we just do that in a kind of purist way. Um, so I kind of see those kind of two future projections, with kind of analog or digital. I don't know. We'll have to see. Yeah. And what was the other part of the question?
What's next
Oh.
for you?
What's next for me? Well, so this kind of I'm in this sort of I'm expanding, I think, this expansive kind of CPD phase, compassion focused therapy, been looking at interpersonal neurobiology, uh, kind of widening this toolkit that we've talked about this before. Um, And yeah, I feel like I'm in this also this kind of expansive, integrative moment as well, but with this kind of Gestalt, whatever this is, this Gestalt
Anchor.
anchor. Thank you, anchor, core
Mm,
belief. Yeah.
yeah. And is there anything that I haven't asked, but you feel like you would like to add? That just to have the feeling that you've said everything felt important to you.
I feel very complete in this conversation that I feel the only thing I want to name, I guess, that's coming up for me now, which I want to say is it's this experience has felt slightly unfamiliar for me to be this a certain sort of focus of attention here on
Mm.
me. And I notice that I'm wanting to ask you if you how what's, is there anything that we've talked about or anything that's come up that's particularly struck you or that you're sitting with or that's sort of, in the air for you that you feel like sharing or you feel like
Mm.
bringing?
I mean, as for me, given that, we've trained together and then we also, we went to museums together, I was just sitting with sort of the images of what I remember of you.
Mm,
Um, and those like brief moments, I just what came to me was the presence of absence, something that it was just so strong coming from me that there was as you were speaking, and
mhm.
then just walking in Tate. uh, I don't know, because as you were speaking about the art and just the small moments of friendship, I guess, that were coming in this conversation, but also just almost like getting to know you in a new way from a new place, um, was
Yeah,
was kind of very interesting. And
yeah,
and I think for the other stuff, the resonances, I think I've shared them throughout the conversation. So I felt it was dialogic in a sense that, but yeah, I did have those flashback moments of the
yeah.
physical
Ah,
times we spent together. Yeah.
yeah. Thank you for bringing those to this space now. I think that makes a lot of sense as well. As you say that, I'm really aware of, yeah, this is a kind of a format of us talking in a different space, but in the background, in the ground of
Yeah.
this exists this training we did together, exists these museum experiences,
Yeah.
and this friendship and
Yeah.
this wider relationship that's there.
And one thing that I was also sitting with as you were speaking was just your embodiment, which I think was always there, but it just feels much more refined.
Mm.
And I felt like I was almost learning from you as you were exploring yourself and sitting in
Ah,
that awareness and slowness. I really enjoyed your slowness. Um, it felt very much like the answers you were giving, even the ones where you were like, oh, I'm in my head, I'm heady. There was that
mm,
awareness of what's going on as it was going on.
mm.
Um, and that felt really beautiful to observe, really. Um, just I was thinking, oh my God, it's so much fun it must be so much fun to be your client, and how much you can learn from that. So yeah.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. That really means really
Mm,
land that. I'm very touched.
yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I feel then we can end here. I felt almost to name a Gestalt thing, this moment felt very Idawish. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.